All right, well, I want to welcome everyone to another episode of our G22 Outdoor Adventures. In this episode, I am going to I'm going to actually do some repairs and a guide wrap on a friend's GLoomisGLX 13-foot float rod. Now these rods come with recoil guides. That's what we're replacing here. This is a recoil made by REC. Titanium wire, ultra light. I think they're really good guides. I love them. And when we're measuring these guides, we want to use the outside diameter. So it's the diameter on the outside of the guide, not on the inside. So, and it matches up with the size 10. Size 12 is too big. Size 16 is way too big. Size 8 is a little bit on the small side, so size 10 fits just right. So it was a size 10. That's what we got. So now we're going to replace it. And I also looked at the rest of the rod, and the other two butt guides also need to be rewrapped. So we're going to now. The great thing about doing all this is you do not need to go to a custom rod builder to have this repaired. You don't need to do anything like that. It requires just some simple tools. One, you could use a file or a Dremel because you're going to have to prep the guide feet. They don't come prepped. You're going to have to file them smooth, okay? And you want to put a nice little ramp that goes all the way down to a nice point. That way you have a nice transition point from the blank to the guide as you're wrapping your thread. You can use a piece of braid to pull the knot through to make your knot. Masking tape to hold the guide on. You could use a rod wrapper if you want, if you have one. Doesn't have to be fancy. Or if you wanted to, you could use a bobbin and thread. That's a great way to do it. It's super easy. You can control your tension, and honestly, if you're doing simple thread wraps and not any inlays, then that's the way I think it's a really good way to go. Some brushes when you're going to apply your epoxy. A razor blade or some sort of knife or scissors because you're going to do some trimming. And obviously the thread you're going to use. Now there's different ways you can use as thread tension. Like I said, you can use a bobbin, and that's a great way to control the tension. You can put the thread in a bowl. You can stack a bunch of books on top of the thread. You can run the thread through some pages on a book, and you keep stacking to get the amount of tension you want. Or you can hook it up to a rod wrapper like this. We're going to put the guide on, get it taped up, and then we're going to start wrapping, and I'll show you guys how to do that. You want to kind of make a tag end, and then you just take your thread right here, and all you do is you just trap it, and you keep it trapped, and you keep wrapping over it a few times until you can just let it go, and then you just allow it to wrap nice and simple on its own. And now this is where it requires a lot of attention to detail when you're trying to wrap this, because you don't want threads to overlap, and you really don't want to leave spaces. But if you leave a space or two here and there, that's okay, because you're going to pack the threads when you're done, and then you're going to use a burnishing tool, and you're going to go over it and smooth everything out and flatten the threads. And that will usually fill in all the gaps. Okay, so as you see, we've got the threads trapped. We're going to take our time, and we're going to get all this wrapped up. If you remember that transition point I mentioned, we're getting to that transition point now. And you'll see that now that we have this ramp all looking good, this transition point, this thread will go right over it, and it'll be super easy, nice and neat. You'll see. Here we go. We're getting to that transition point. There. Now we're coming up on top. We're coming up on the guide. Okay. And you can, if you want to, you can probably even increase the tension on the spool. So that way our thread's a little bit tighter as we're wrapping. And that will help secure the guide. There. And we're going to do the next two just like this. So when we get all of this completed, and then we'll actually go over applying the epoxy. Okay, all right. So now you see how it's done. I'm gonna get the rod. I'm gonna get this guide wrapped, and then when we get to the point where we're gonna tie it off, we'll turn the camera back on and we'll show you how all that's done too. All right. So at this point in the build, we're at the tie-off point. So what I did was I took that braid that I showed you guys at the very beginning of the video, and all I did was just lay that on top of the guide wrap, and then I made my first wrap on top of it. And basically what that does, that traps it in, and this is what we're going to tie for our knot. And all we're going to do, we're just going to keep wrapping this over. Now you can use regular rod wrapping thread for this, but I don't like to, because when you make these nice and tight, the thread sometimes has a tendency to break when you're pulling it through. So I am now at the point where I can start making the locking wrap. We're nearing the end of the thread wrap for this guide. And what I am going to do, and you could do this for all spinning guides, so this works for all of them. Okay? So what I'm going to do is we're going to decrease the thread tension a little bit, and we're going to wrap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this thread in front of the guide. There, just like that. Okay? So the thread goes up in front of the guide. I'm going to bring the wrapper down and bring the thread wrap up and around the guide, and there, locks it in place. Okay? Then we're going to go around the guide. We're going to go do our normal thread wrap. I'm surprised I still remember how to do this. I haven't wrapped one of these rods in a long time. Okay, so now we're back to our origin where we did the first locking wrap. We're going to do it again. So we're going to bring it around, we're going to bring it back in front of the guide like so. Okay, let's try to keep our thread tension on. Okay, I'm going to drop the guide down, bring this around, and then lock it into place. Okay, and then we're going to bring it around again, packing our threads, and you can do this as many times as you want. I usually do it maybe 3 or 4 times. Make sure everything is good and secure. Okay, there. Let's bring it around again. Okay, and again we're gonna bring it around the guide like that. Make sure we get our thread tension. We're gonna lose tension on it, so it's okay. You just have to make sure you get that tension back. Okay, and again, we're gonna drop it down, pull it around. Oh, let's try that one more time. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna drop the guide down, wrap it around. Screwing up. We did it so smooth before. What the heck? Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring it around the guide just like that and lock it into place. And all you do is just keep your thread tension on, okay? And you just reapply your tension. And we'll do it one more time just so you guys can see it, okay? And like I said, every spinning guide that we're going to do on this rod is going to be done the same exact way. And we'll give credit where credit is due. This was, to the best of my knowledge, originated by a rod builder named Richard Forehand. And it was called the Forehand lock. There we go. Okay. All right. that's it. That's all there is to it. Oh, I forgot to actually tell you guys how to tie this off. I mean, I'm sure it's pretty straightforward. I'm sure you already know how to do it. But anyways, what you do is you take your thread, okay? Get a nice length of thread. Take your knife, razor blade or whatever it is, cut it, okay? Keeping tension on this. What I like to do is I will then bring this through here. I guess we can do another wrap through here like that. Okay. Bring it through that loop, okay? Let's just do this. There we go. All right. Okay. So then we're going to bring this back here like this. And what I like to do is just keep bringing this through. And see how I got that thread trapped right there? Here, let me see. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll see if I can get a close up on it. So the thread is trapped, okay? That thread's not going to go anywhere. I'm not concerned about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my razor blade and I am going to cut it fairly close because I don't want this coming through. Okay, so we're going to cut it right about, let's say, what do you think? We cut it right about there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this rod out of the rod holder right here. I'm going to hold it like this, and then I'm going to give it a quick pull, but instead of pulling straight back, I'm going to pull it up at an angle. Like, you'll see. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Just like that. And then you just take your fingernail and you burnish it all together. So while we were doing this whole wrap, we were packing the thread and everything like that. Okay? So there. We have our thread wrap in. We have our locking wrap done. And this guide is good to go. GLoomisGLX STR 1562-2S 13-foot light moderate action. Okay, so we're at the final stages of this build here. I did all the guide wraps, as you can see. So this rod has brand new guide wraps on the butt section, and now it's time to apply some epoxy. So we're going to apply some epoxy here. Now the epoxy is a 1-to-1 mix, so it doesn't really matter how you measure it. You can measure it by volume or you can measure it by weight. I choose to measure it by weight. So I went about 4.5–5 grams. And that's how we got our mixture here, our 1-to-1 mixture. So let's get this applied. And you really want to get these threads coated. I also went over the thread with some alcohol to try to get all the oil from my greasy fingers off. So I want to try to get this all inside the threads here. I want this epoxy to soak into the threads. You want to get them all completely covered. And we're going to let this sit for overnight, and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll put the final coat on and we'll call this rod done. And this is the same epoxy that I use to coat my fishing lures. And I'm going to hit this with some heat to try to melt it a little bit, and then see if we can't get it inside, let it soak right into those threads, which is what we want. Let's see. So that's why we're going to try to heat it up. And then that heat also releases the air bubbles. Okay, so I gotta see if I get this plugged in for it'll work. Okay, so there's our guides finished. We just need one more coat of epoxy to go on them. So here is the finished rod guide that we replaced on this GLoomisGLX 13-foot float rod. We did 2 coats of epoxy and did our locking wrap, and there we go. This is another guide that I rewrapped. And then I also did this one as well. This is the butt guide. Got the rod all polished up and everything. It looks good. It's ready for the owner, and hopefully we can get it out to him at some point today. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for watching this episode of RG22 Outdoor Adventures. Hopefully you guys have learned something about rod building, wrapping guides. Hopefully this will help you guys save a little bit of money on rewrapping rods that look like the guides are starting to fall off. And hopefully this also will maybe spark a little interest in custom rod building as well. So thanks again for watching. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and don't forget to share these videos with your fishing buddies. All right, so we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.